Should you rent a car here in Hungary? And is Budapest a good place actually to rent a car? How easy is it to drive around? And are the locals aggressive? This is what you will find out in this video, including a few scams that sometimes happen and my best way to avoid that. But let me be honest with you don't really need a car if you think to uniquely visit Budapest. Budapest is really well served by public transportation. You get a bus straight on to District 5, which is the central area of Budapest, and to District 8, which is the other super nice area with plenty of bars and cafes. So if you take accommodation in those areas and you plan just to visit the city, the baths and so on, then in my opinion you don't need a car. But if you plan to visit some of the destinations outside of Budapest, or you want to visit the country, the Balaton Lake, then a car is essential because you have public transportation, but it's not as frequent. And with your rented car, you can stop everywhere. You're gonna visit and experience so much more of Hungary. When you rent a car, you have the option to go for the global players, like here, for example, Hertz, we have Avis, Europe Car, or you go with more local players. The main difference is about the cost. Usually with the local providers is much cheaper, but unfortunately the cars tend to be also older and the maintenance not as good as with the global players. Another difference that you may experience is that with the global players, you can pick up the car directly from the airport. Meanwhile, with the local providers, they usually pick you up with a shuttle bus, they take you to the office outside the airport, and that's where you're gonna pick up the car. What I've been doing for the last 5 years is to use a comparative website that is a sort of Airbnb for cars, where all of the providers are ranked between 5 and 10 based on the feedback of the customers like myself. I'm gonna put the link of this comparative website in the video description so you can have a check. And personally, I put a filter between 8 and 10. In this way, I tend to avoid all of the fishy providers. And what about the insurance in your car? Usually the car is provided with a basic insurance and with an excess that typically range between 3,000 to 5,000 euros. I personally suggest to have a full insurance to cover this excess, and here is the great news. You may have it already actually in your credit card travel insurance. So check it out, and in this case you are already covered and ready to go. If you don't, you can always do it for 8 to 10 euros a day in that website that I was suggesting before, and you find the link in the video description, or you can do it at the desk, but in that case expect to pay between 20, 30 euros and 50 euros a day. Overall, I definitely suggest to have a full insurance because you will have such a peace of mind. Because if you have a scratch or bump in your car, we're gonna charge you between 300 and 500 euros, which is pretty expensive and is gonna screw up your holiday. But let's go down to driving rules and regulations that are more specific to Hungary. The first thing, which is pretty unique actually to the country, is that headlights have always to stay on whenever you leave the cities and you drive in the countryside or on the highways. Just be aware that it's strictly enforced, so remember to leave them always on when you leave the city. Personally, I always leave them anyway, also in the city. Another important one is the zero alcohol tolerance. And it's not just about, yeah, it's fine to drink actually a glass of wine or a glass of beer whenever you have dinner outside. No, it's zero, which means you can't drink anything. Just be aware there are checks around, so don't leave it going. Remember to never drink and drive. That's very important. And to be honest with you, this is a good thing because driving around is pretty safe, especially compared with other countries in Europe where drinking is more tolerated. Another specific thing to Hungary is the vignette. There are other countries actually in Europe that do have it. And similarly to these countries, the vignette is a pass that you need if you drive on the highways. You can do a vignette, this pass, for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or for the length of your trip. If you're not going to drive on the highway, don't worry about that. Nowadays the vignette is digital, which means there is a digital check on your number plate. You don't need to put it anymore on the windscreen. How is traffic and local driving? Well, expect some traffic in Budapest, that's for sure. If you have to go through the city, you need to budget 40 to 50 minutes. But besides that, once you are in the countryside, it's no problem at all. Balaton Lake and all of its major destinations in summer obviously are packed, so expect some traffic there as well from the city. But overall, the locals drive very nicely, I must say. There is not much of honking around, and my experience is that they are all very polite. So definitely driving in Hungary is a good experience, and so much better than in many countries in Southern Europe. And now, how is parking in Hungary? Well, there is a big difference between the city of Budapest and once you get outside of the city. But let's start from the capital. I'm gonna put a map in the background where you will see that most of the central area is divided in 4 areas, zone A, B, C and D. And typically in each of these areas you can drive up to 3 hours in a spot. And for all of these areas you need to use a meter parking. Now, based on the color of the area, that is zone A, B, C and D, you'll be charged more or less, and the cost goes from 1 to about 3 euros per hour. There is also a time limit, which is typically between 2 and 3 hours. So once you park the car, you need to buy a ticket from the meter parking spot, put it inside the car, visible on the windscreen, and off you go. Some of the machines where you buy the ticket actually don't have English, which makes things a little bit more complicated. And for this reason, I personally suggest to use an app which is Park, that is going to allow you to buy a digital ticket, and moreover you can also search for parking areas and parking garage within the city. So very handy, especially if you don't speak Hungarian. Once you're outside of Budapest, parking is so much easier. In some of the other cities, obviously, you have still meter parking, but if you use Park app, off you go as easy as in Budapest. Petrol and gas stations in Hungary are pretty straightforward in a way that typically they are self-service, which means you need to put the petrol inside your car by yourself, and you can pay with either a credit or a debit card. My suggestion here is to bring some cash always with you, because you never know, maybe the credit card machine doesn't work, especially if you go to some of the rural regions. Just make sure to put the correct petrol inside your car. If you have a diesel car, use gasoline, and if you have a petrol car, use benzene. And now about the cost. This is very similar to what you find in most of Europe, so between 1.5 and 2 euros per liter, which is pretty expensive if you come like me from Australia or you come from the US. And now let me give you a few suggestions on easy road trips from Budapest. The first one that comes to my mind is definitely the Lake Balaton, which is about 1.5 hours from Budapest and is known as the Hungarian Sea. It's an also summer destination. It's where most of the city goes during the hot months. So plenty of people around, and it's a good fun for both the young crowd and also the oldies like me, just to relax along the lake. Another great spot, which is only 45 minutes from Budapest, is the Danube Bend, where you will have awesome views, beautiful old towns, cafes, restaurants around, so definitely worth exploring it. Before closing this video, I just wanted to give you a couple of words about scams and hidden fees here in Hungary and Budapest. First off, check if there is an airport fee. This could be an expensive one, and they may not charge you actually when you rent the car, but only when you pick it up. So before you book a car, just check that either the car is from outside the airport, so in this case there is no airport fee, or if they do offer the car inside the airport, then check that there is no airport fee. The second thing, which is a little bit of a scam, check what is the petrol policy. Empty to empty is the worst, because obviously it will be very hard to take back the car completely empty, so you will lose some petrol on the way. And then the third thing, which is really a scam, sometimes we're gonna claim that there is one scratch or one bump more than when you picked up the car. So the best way to proceed with that is to do plenty of photos and videos of both the external and the internal of the car. And remember that even if you have a full insurance, sometimes this doesn't cover the interior of the car. So be 100% sure to document the car, because in case there is any issue when you take it back, you can show the photos and there is no problem at all. And with these 3 important tips, I'm gonna close this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I see you in the next one. Of course, subscribe and click the like button. See ya!